Gute Corda agus foilte Arashkadi on Clonestar podcast. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to a very special episode of the Clonestar podcast. I am your host, Sho Hurley, and joining me in the co-host seat this week is my good friend Judi Pickens. Jodi, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Sho. So happy to be here.
Fantastic stuff. And this week we're joined by a very, very special guest, a star of stage and screen, someone who is currently pounding the boards in the Moulin Rouge play at the moment, someone who has narrated over 350 audiobooks and is a massive Star Trek geek. We are delighted to be welcome the wonderful Robert Petkoff. Robert, how are you?
Oh, I'm well. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so excited to be on this. And nervous too, because I'm always like, what will I remember? What will I remember of these things? You know, the specifics. People have asked me sometimes about books I've narrated. They go, what was it like when you were done? I'm like, which book was that? Who was the author? You know, I've done, I think, like 35 of the Star Trek books. So it starts to jumble. But yes, that's the long answer to I'm doing well.
Oh my God, that means, Jodi, about like 90% of the interview is now cancelled if you can't remember the details.
We're through it all.
Yeah. What was the point in the notes? I just don't even know anymore. Robert, you have had such a varied career in terms of everything that you've done and things like that, but where does it all start? Did you grow up in a creative household, or where did the creative spark come from?
You know, it's interesting. I wouldn't say I grew up in a creative household per se. I know that my parents, when they were both in high school, played opposite each other in a play. The only play they ever did together, playing a boyfriend and girlfriend, and so there was something there. My father, much more than my mother. I think my father was in the Air Force. He would seemed to be a not particularly creative man from the exterior, but I think there was always in him a performer. The people who knew him, he very much a salesman, very much someone who was very outgoing and very sociable. And I think if he had lived his dream life, it would have been perhaps as a crooner a la Frank Sinatra. He used to say, you know, I see you like sitting at a bar behind a piano, little brandy snifter on there, just playing standards for people and getting tips. And I'm like, no, you see yourself that way. And I think that was sort of his sort of dream. But no, you know, I didn't grow up in a household with art and music and all that. And but it just came. I sort of fell backwards into it. I considered myself very shy, and then there was a young lady that I had a crush on in the beginning of high school, and I was playing football, soccer, and she was in drama. And in the school, you auditioned for all the plays at once for the year, and I thought if I try out for these plays, I could get closer to her, and I tried out and got into all the plays, and she didn't get into any of them. And so I was stuck. I was like, oh no, what have I done? But that first moment I walked out on stage in that first play, and a bunch of my buddies came and watched it. And of course I walked out on stage and they all started cheering and clapping. And a part of me was like, this feels right. This feels good. And then, of course, over time, I had an amazing drama teacher who really showed me that you could look at something like this seriously. And so he really, his name is Dan Martinkus, and he really made me think about this as a potential career, acting and performing like that.
Hang on a second, Robert, we have to go back here for a second now. Like you've left out probably the most important part of the story. Like granted, I know your wife's in the house as well, so we'll keep it quiet.
Never
we don't
did.
Need to say it. Oh, you didn't? No.
I never did. No.
What?
Never did. We became friends, but never did date. So it was funny. But it's an amazing way to sort of fall backwards into this whole career. But I found myself coming out of myself. I found that, you know, the storytelling, it's all storytelling, right? It's acting, music, everything is just telling a story in different ways. And discovering that ability to either live through someone else and experience their emotions, or express emotions I was feeling through the filter of a character really opened up my life in an amazing way. Because I had, like I said, it was kind of quiet and a little reserved, and this was the ability to sort of put on a mask, and so you're not really looking at me crying, you're not really looking at me expressing anger. It's this character, and then through that, of course, you get to expurgate some of the things that you're going through.
And who would have been some of your inspirations then, Robert, at this point in your life? Who would you some of the, say, the actors you would have looked up to going, that's
And
kind of what I want to
in that
do?
early period, oddly, and not oddly because he's talented, but Richard Burton was huge for me because I had just seen him in his final tour of Camelot, in Chicago at the Airy Crown Theater, and he was playing King Arthur. And then that year, my high school was doing Camelot, and I played King Arthur. So of course, all I did was an imitation of Richard Burton. Merlin, make me a hawk. Let me fly away from here, Merlin. But in a high school boy's voice, it's just not even close. Um, but yeah, I just remember, he was much older then, but I remember that vocally, with his he wasn't running around the stage like a young man, but vocally he was. He told that story so well, and I was captivated. I think then as I got older, you know, the actors that really captured me more were people who disappeared into their roles. Um, I think of someone like I think my favorite actor is Daniel Day-Lewis. I think there's something about him that you don't see him in every one of his roles. And there are amazing actors. I think of Robert De Niro in Taxi Driver. But Robert De Niro throughout his career, after a while, you start to see more Robert De Niro. You believe what he's doing, you believe the characters he's creating and all that, but you're watching a little bit of Robert De Niro, and so the people that I gravitate toward are the ones that I think, how did you just become someone completely different?
It's like when you see Daniel Day-Lewis accepting an Academy Award and you see him talking and he's this like shy, timid,
Yeah,
exceptionally soft. It's almost like he's embarrassed to be up on stage. And you're
yeah,
there going, wait a second, how the hell is that you in the movie that I've
yeah.
seen? And then this is you in actual reality.
Yeah, and it goes back to me. I think that first play that I did. Again, I was very quiet around the house, and at that age, I think that teenage where you don't really talk to your parents much, and you hide. And I remember my mother came and saw it, and I had gone out with the cast afterwards, and came back in the house and was creeping up the stairs, and from her bedroom, she's like, Bob, and I was like, oh, she's awake. I don't want to talk to her. And she goes, come here. And I came in her room and she goes, hey, I saw that play tonight. And I was like, oh, okay. And she goes, I didn't know who that was on stage. That was just a complete stranger to me. You were so good. You were wonderful. It was amazing to see that person. Um, and I was like, okay, okay, thanks, Mom. Good night. And I think I walked out of that hall, just walked out of the doorway in time so she wouldn't see me burst into tears.
Oh.
Just be like, oh, that just meant so much to me, and I just was at that age where, again, the most painful thing in the world is to talk to your parents at that age. You just don't want to be seen with them or whatever. But I was stunned at the time by how much that affected me, and how much that meant to me. And I think that's somewhere in there is that part of that thing is like all these people like Daniel Day-Lewis who don't walk around like that every day, but then craft and mold from their own physical beings and their own emotional beings a whole person that is so very different from who they are, but obviously not that different because they're still the same person, and they're creating it out of the clay that they possess. So I think it's just fascinating to me that you can give it that thought, you can physicalize and vocalize in a way that it's just someone different. And I think one of the best compliments I've received while doing Moulin Rouge right now is someone offhandedly saying, it's so funny, you're so different than the character you play on stage. And a part of me was like, thank you. It's because it is a character I'm playing on stage. I'm not playing myself, you know.
So in your current role in Moulin Rouge then, Robert, at the moment, how different is the character you play versus, say, the man we're talking to right now?
Oh yeah, well, you know, Harold Ziedler. He's a showman. He's a con artist. He's you know, there are definitely elements of him inside me, obviously, that I use to come out, but there are also elements of him that I would personally reject. You know, that I would never want to foist on anyone in my life. You know, and so there's that sense of I will find the darker parts of me that I don't share with everyone, and I will definitely bring those to light with him when he's dark. But he's you know he's it's such a great character John Logan has written because he isn't just dark. He isn't just one thing. You know, this is a man who at the beginning of the play has absolutely one mission, and that is to have his star Satine seduce the Duke so that he can get an infusion of cash into the club and keep things going because he's going to lose the whole enterprise. And this has been the pattern, I think, for years. You know, wealthy men come in, they give money through Satine, and we keep this thing going. But we are on the brink, and it's desperation now. It's the last chance, I think, at this point. And so he's a very desperate man willing to do anything. The first thing we see of him is the absolute showman, welcoming everyone to Moulin Rouge and being, you know, larger than life and lovely. And then the first time you see him with Satine alone, he reveals what's really going on. We're here to try to get this plan. And of course, things go wrong. It's Moulin Rouge, and there's a mix-up of identities, et cetera, which makes for a lot of fun. But through the course of the evening, this man is, you know, entertaining. He's pushy. He's angry as hell. He's mean at times, and that's a meanness that comes out of desperation. I think Satine is very much like a daughter to him. But anyone who's a parent knows there are times when you get very angry at your children. And it, unfortunately for Harold, in the moment where he expresses his greatest frustration with her, is also the moment he discovers. I don't know if I can call it a spoiler because the movie was out in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
But when he discovers that things are not going to be as good for her as he thought it was going to be, it's such a smack. It's such a splash of water. It's any parent who yelled at a child who then passed away, or who yelled at someone and then discovered it wasn't their fault, whatever. That sense of instant regret that you took that tone with someone you loved, So there's this whole 1,000 different things going on with him, which makes, I've done the play now for over 2 years, and I think I would lose my mind in some of the roles I've played, because they weren't as full as this, and the person wasn't as well rounded as this.
I'm curious, Robert. Say, for instance, I remember reading before about Leonard Nimoy saying that when he would go home from shooting the evenings, it would take a while to, say, leave the Spock character behind and go back to being Leonard Nimoy. Yeah. Do you find that in your current role at the moment? Because as you said, you've been doing it for 2 years. Because again, you're this lovely, softly spoken man up on stage. It's a very different person up there. Do you find it hard to kind of just get back down to? Is there something you need to do once the show's over to kind of say, I need this space, this time to do this thing to bring Robert back to the fore?
I get a wonderful decompression after the show, which is you go to the Broadway stage door, and there are all kinds of people who want autographs and want to meet, me, but they want to really meet right now. Meg Donnelly is playing Satine, and she's well known from the Disney Zombies movies and from American Housewife and other things. She has so many fans coming to see her.
Robert, forget it. Let's be honest about it. They're there to see you, right? They are not there to see something. They're totally there for you, right?
Oh, I made a joke with her backstage just before we were going out the stage door. I was getting ready to go out, and I saw that she was about to leave too. I said, "Oh, Meg, you probably should go out first, because I don't want you to hear the louder cheer for me when I come out the stage door." And of course, then I went out first. And I went out first, and it was one of the few times, usually the crowd, when they see you, they recognize you and they let up a big cheer. It was one of the very few times where I came out and people were like, "Hey," it was very mild. And I started laughing so hard because, of course, Meg came out. They screamed, and we were in tears. As we're signing, we're looking at each other, and we're laughing so hard because of the joke I had just made.
That is fantastic.
Absolutely. It was perfect. But I come out that stage door, and there's still a part of me that gets to be the showman, the guy from the beginning of the show who hasn't gone through this very heavy journey of desperation and loss. And so that, the play itself ends with a wonderful encore that really brightens the mood. No, they don't want anyone leaving the show.
Right.
Feeling the tragedy of it all. We give them confetti cannons, so everyone's in a good mood. But going out the stage door and talking to the audience that has just seen the show is really wonderful because I get to be a little bit of Harold Ziedler mixed with me as we go. So that's a wonderful compression. And I live about a 25-minute walk from the theater. And so I will often just walk home, and that walk is great because it can shed the night. I can get back to, who I am and come home and then collapse in a chair and, play video games or talk to my wife, and not necessarily in that order. Maybe talk to my wife, play video game. But yeah,
Robert,
there have been roles where, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, please go ahead.
There have been roles. I toured the role of Bruce Bechtel in Fun Home, and that is a very different play than Moulin Rouge, and his journey through the evening is so different and ends in a terrible way. And that one I found really hard to just shake off at the end of the night. You're talking about a man who kills himself, and so you can live in sort of a dark place at the end of that. I played Hamlet years ago, and my poor wife would be in rehearsals, and we'd be having dinner between rehearsal and a preview, say, and we would be talking about something, and because Hamlet is about everything in the world ties back into, or at least it was for me at that time. And so we would be at dinner having a discussion about anything, and she would see me suddenly start going,
Sorry. Something fell on the ground right next to me.
No. I was just saying that I would just stop talking. She's chatting with me, and I would just start going, and thinking about either the play or the things she talked about, how it related to Hamlet. And she'd be like, Hamlet, come back. And so, yeah, there are definitely roles where you throw yourself into them on such a level. And they've done studies. Actors' bodies don't know they're playing. Physiologically, when you're going through panic, when you're going through sorrow, grief, physiologically what you're doing is what you do when you're going through those events. And so the body doesn't know that you're just making it up. And so when you do it and then you get off stage, sometimes it is very hard to just go. And there are other times, delightfully so, that you'll be like, that really didn't go well, did it? And you run off and you're just laughing off stage at what just happened. So
I'm curious, knowing where you are now in your career, what would the high school version of you think?
Oh man, I don't think I would have had a clue that people would pay me money to read books. I loved reading when I was a kid, and so much so that I really mourn for young people now who don't have that experience. And listen, I'm as entangled in screens now as anyone under 20. But that sense of wanting to just get away from everybody, so you get up to your room, so you could crack into that story again, and go, and not this. It's just not the same as swiping and getting an endorphin hit, and swiping and getting an endorphin hit. You go into a world, and they become your friends. They become the person you're afraid of. They become you enter another world, and so I loved that as a kid. And so the notion that I would get paid to read books, and tell stories. And the notion that as much as I loved acting then, I mean, I think I loved entertaining then.
Okay.
And I learned to love acting and telling stories more that were less about me, being the center of the spotlight and more about sharing universal truths and sharing perspectives that other people don't have. With maturity comes that sense that it's more than that. I think I would be a miserable person if I'd stayed at that level. If
Mm.
I'd stayed at the level of look at me, because good God, you're going to go through in a career of acting lots of times where no one's looking at you, and you'd be a miserable son of a bitch.
And Robert,
But
just listen to your voice, like just for we even long before we get into the audiobooks and things like that. Like, how much did you have to train your voice? Because you can hear it here. There's this sense of kind of like authority in your voice. There's a complete sense of like, I want to listen to every single word this man is saying. And every word you say is as important as the word that came before it and as important as the word that's going to come after it. And like, that's not natural. That's something that obviously has to be kind of,
yeah, I mean, thank you. I can tell you that when I went to drama school, I went to Illinois State University, not necessarily one of the Ivy Leagues, but when I got there and hit my first vocal teacher, I pretty confident that the voice I had when I got there was like this. I was a Midwest kid from Illinois, and so that's how I think I talked back then. And just so, because you get vocal training like that, you also, I'll go back to my guy Richard Burton. I had read a biography of his, and one of the things that they said he did in there, and I don't know if it was apocryphal or real, was that he would go out to the hills and do these heroic monologues from Shakespeare at the top of his lungs, and until he could no longer speak, and then keep going out and doing it over and over until he could do them and continue to speak. And he discovered naturally how he could place his voice to do that. And so I remember in college, there was an outdoor theater stage for the Illinois Shakespeare Festival. And I would drive my car out there and climb up to the top and do that same thing, I'd show up in class the next day and people are like, what are you doing? You're not even in a show right now. What's happening? But my vocal teachers were very good about, finding that, helping me find a way to talk in a more a relaxed way and less, hold less tension and do all the things that you learn technically.
it's interesting. I've said this story in this podcast before, but I was listening to the autobiography of John Cleese, the British actor, and he was saying that like John Cleese is big, powerful, imposing person with his exceptionally like commanding voice. But when he was in theater class, he was being like we assume he was always like that, but obviously exactly
Yeah.
Robert as you said he wasn't. He would be talking, and the director would be louder. And he'd go louder. The director would say, would you please talk louder? And he said he got to the stage where he felt he was screaming. But the director was there going, like, now this is what I want. Because he said, you're not talking to the front row. He said, you have
Yes,
to hit all four corners of the room. You
absolutely.
have to get everybody involved. And did you find that, Robert, in terms of, say, like, to kind of get that level where it's not like screaming, but it has a gravitas that it can take your voice everywhere.
Oh, thank you. It's very difficult doing Moulin Rouge the musical, for instance, because we're mic'd, and all of my instincts from when I started, which was a lot of Shakespeare, and that's where a lot of the vocal work came from too. Um, all of my instincts are to hit the back of the house, and when you're in a 3,000 seat theater, you're going to lose your voice very quickly. And so it takes a lot for me to learn to trust that little microphone and the guy behind the booth, who's adjusting it, to say, no, no, you're going to take care of this for me. And it's a very big difference. I've toured with it, and we go into these giant houses, and I've done it on Broadway. Last year I did it during the holiday season. This year I'm doing it during the holiday season on Broadway, and it's a more intimate house, and it has velvet all over, to make it look like the Moulin Rouge. But I say to people, it's like singing into a pillow. You don't get a bounce back of sound. And so, again, my natural instinct is to be louder. The character himself is already the loudest person in the show. And so the first time I did it, by the second week, I had to take a couple shows off because I was losing my voice. And I had to really discipline myself that I'm not going to hear what I would hear in an empty theater uh, of the bounce back. I just have to trust that the audience is hearing. If I start talking like this, hit the third row, and I'll be fine. And if I just go for the third row, I'll be okay. So it's interesting. But yeah, that work with Shakespeare, invaluable. The learning to phrase in Shakespeare is absolutely is what gives me what I do in audiobook narration now. To be able to keep phrases going, to know how to do a parenthetical and to get you to the end of a thought.
And when you
Really
were
important.
going through your early part of your career, Robert, did you kind of say to yourself, going, do you know what, stage acting, that's what I want to do? Or did you say, no, I want to follow my hero, Richard Burton, and kind of go onto the screen, go onto TV, or whatever the case may be? Or what did you think?
When I started, I'm sure that there was a part of me who was like, oh, I want to be in the movies, but theater was the thing that I kept working at. And I did. I got a TV pilot, which was a spin-off from a series called Who's the Boss?
Mhm.
And Catherine Hellman, who played the mother on that, very spicy, sort of sexy older woman on the show. They gave her own. They were trying to give her own series called Mona. And I got this pilot, and I went out to L.A. and then I ended up moving to L.A. for 5 years. And so I did some TV work. I was playing like sort of the boyfriend of the girl on the show, kind of a thing. But I never booked another big pilot. And in the meantime, I started doing more theater in Los Angeles at the Mark Taper Forum and places like that. And at a certain point, I remember thinking, boy, I shouldn't be in LA for theater. There is theater in LA, and there's very good theater in LA. But if I want to do theater, it would probably be New York. And the heavens opened up and plopped my wife into my lap. We did a show, a Moliere play called The School for Husbands at the Old Globe Theater in San Diego. And she was living in New York. I was living in LA. And not too long after that show closed, I'd say within 6 months, I was in a car driving from New York to LA with her, or sorry, from LA to New York with her to move to New York. And it was terrifying because I spent a year unemployed, unemployable and unemployed. And I thought, oh, have I made a huge mistake? What's happened? And I got invited to be the reader for an audition by a casting director I knew in LA. They were seeing about 5 actresses in New York for this show out there. And I said, sure, I'll do that because I was doing nothing else. And for the first time, I got to sit in a rehearsal room or an audition room and watch how other actors auditioned and realized instantly I'd been doing it all wrong for theater. In television, for especially sitcoms that I was doing, I would get a call for an audition. I would go to the studio, pick up the script about a half an hour before the audition, take a quick breeze through it, quickly commit what I saw to memory, and then maybe improv some stuff if I felt it was funnier or whatever. And so it was very loose, and just here's what I'm going to do with it, and here's a very loosey goosey idea. Um, I would get to New York and try to do the same thing with a play and had no idea that other actors are actually breaking that down, breaking that character down, memorizing the text and not just looking at the words, but making choices and walking in the room and saying to the casting people, here's what I will do with this role. Where I was going, hey, here's an idea. What do you think? What would you like to have happen? And so right after that audition, I went, oh, I guess I can't just wing it. And I started really looking what would I do if I had the role. And within I think 2 months, I had my first reel. I got cast at the Shakespeare Theater down in Washington D.C. For a season, and it changed everything. Then I didn't stop working. Knock wood. you know, but it was life-changing to sit in that room and watch, because I watched very familiar actresses uh, come in, and I watched three of them come in and do kind of what I did, which was hold the script and just kind of read, generally say, I'm who I am, and you know who I am. And so I'm just going to give you my version of the character by reading these words. And then two actresses walked in and were the character. They came in the room, and you could tell they weren't that person. They were talking to, they were agreeable, and they were charming. And then it started, and they became this character. And I went, oh my God, they're acting in the audition. I mean, they're bringing it.
This never even remotely occurred to me at any point.
Why would you work so hard for something you don't even get paid for? And I'm like, oh, because you want to get paid for it down the road and you want the job. And so and that just sort of went through for everything. You have to, oh God, I'm going to tell this story. You have to bring the sword is an expression I say with my wife and I. When I auditioned to play King Arthur in Camelot in high school, my father had gone to England and brought back two decorative swords. I'd asked him to bring me back a sword. I was miffed because they weren't real swords, but they were decorative swords you have on the wall. And for the audition, I thought, I really want this role. And so I wrapped up. Now, of course, today they would call the police, but I wrapped the sword in a pillowcase, brought it in, and I stashed it backstage because the auditions were after school. And then instead of walking straight up to the stage on the steps that everyone was doing, you're sitting in the auditorium to audition, you go straight up the steps. I go behind, and everyone's like, oh, what's he doing? And I pulled a sword out. I came out and I did King Arthur's, Excalibur speech, the speech he does at the end of the first act. And I got the job. And flash forward 4 years later, I'm in my senior year in college. And now I'm too cool for school, right? I'm like, you don't show that you want something, I know I'm good. I'm a good actor. And, you just don't want to want it too much, or that's kind of square and nerdy and it was Richard III was the play. And that was the role I wanted, but I was like, couldn't show it. And, they called up another actor, to audition. Instead of going up the stairs, he went around the side of the stage. I'm like, what's he doing? And from behind the curtain, you started hearing a recorder play. And he played it a little bit, and then he had like a sour note, and he popped out from behind the curtain, and now is the winter of our discontent. And unfortunately for him, he didn't understand what a lute was. That's why he had a recorder. So when he said to the lascivious pleasing of a lute, he went on the recorder. And I'm like, no, you're thinking flute, my friend. But he got the job because he showed how much he wanted it. He showed, and I was like, I said later, he brought the sword.
Mm-hmm.
And so from that moment on, that audition there and that audition in New York, I was like, you have to bring the sword. You want the job? Do what it takes to get the job. Even if you're going to look silly, even if you're going to think you're going to embarrass yourself in some way, do the thing that you think will get you the job. Bring the sword, because my God, how regretful it's going to be to not bring the sword and see someone else do that. At that moment in that theater, I went, oh my God, what have I done? I'm not going to get this job.
I remember 8 years ago, I did a voiceover workshop. And when I was in the booth and kind of doing it, I was being told what to do and all this. It was this weird kind of sense of like, hey, wait a second, I'm not doing that. That's not me. Like, I'm not going to kind of change myself. And then when I was changed myself, it was almost like there was a voice inside my head going, but you're only fucking lying. Like, that's not you. That's somebody else. And as a result, then I couldn't get my head right at all with it, it kind of seems to be saying what you're saying, Robert, in terms like you have to kind of just commit yourself into it and say like, no, it's not me, it's somebody else who have to be here.
Yeah, and that's it. You have to commit. You have to commit to it, and it's the same when narrating audiobooks for me. I've narrated some books. There's a romance series I narrate, a Cressley Cole paranormal romance series. It's the only romance that I do. And when I do those books, I have to commit. And it is weird, admittedly, to be on a mic making love to yourself, making all the sounds, and doing the man and the woman and everything. It's a very strange thing. But in the moment, you have to commit to that. Otherwise, it will be naff. It will be silly. It will be embarrassing, right? Um, Afterwards, when you're done with that chapter, you can go, "Oh my goodness, that is. I need a cigarette. It's weird, but you to everything you have to sort of go, okay. If you don't commit to it, then the chances of it not working are so much higher, you know. And if you do commit to it, the chances of it failing spectacularly are greater, and that's great. I in this point in my career, I would much rather fail spectacularly than just be mediocre. Let someone say, "Wow, I really hated his choices, but he made choices," you know?
That's
And
quite a life philosophy there. I mean, the bring the sword concept.
Yeah.
Do you find that you apply that to more than just your creative side of your life?
I try to. I know there are
Yeah.
times where I fail. I know there are times where my own insecurities and ego will get in the way, and you don't want to, again, you don't want to show how much you want something, or you try to be cool, or whatever. And I do have to fight through that. There are moments during Moulin Rouge that almost make me cry. There are young people coming to see the show, and I think younger than the average audience because of Meg Donnelly. Um, and it's wonderful because you see a young woman who's maybe 12 or 13, and she's just on the cusp. She's a year or two away from hiding all her feelings. She's a year or two away from trying to fit in desperately with everyone around her. So she still has that moment where she will express wonder on her face. And I see, and I'm thinking of like two specific people in the last week, sitting in these seats, and Meg's dancing past them, dancing around them and stuff, and they're like, and I'm like, oh, it's so wonderful, because a lot of us feel that. The adults in the audience are feeling that same childlike wonder, but we're way too cool and way too mature to just go. We feel it, and we're just like, but to see it on a young person, to see that time in their life where they still are not afraid or not aware of the people around them watching them and maybe mocking them or judging them or whatever, it's delightful. And it's reminding me, as I see that, you know what, I don't care what age you are, don't lose that. And let's not be embarrassed by that. Let's look at Star Trek. The amount of times I was mocked in high school for being a Trekkie, for wanting to, liking it. Um, of course, it's embarrassing when people make fun of you like that, but it's wonderful to see the people who go to cons and stuff and dress up and still embrace this and say, "Yeah, I don't care what you think of me. I love this thing." And I'm going to get really excited if I see, Patrick Stewart or whatever, and express that in a way. There's that childlike exuberance. My God, what kind of society are we if we all lose that? You know, where are we heading? Where we're heading. Without that ability to express our joy in things.
Robert, question for you then, right? So, like, you're doing Moulin Rouge for the last 2 years. I'm sure there's other roles you've done for a substantial period of time and things like that. How do you fight the complacency in terms of, say, how do you make sure you stay on top of your game, you remember your lines, you hit your notes, bring all the
Yeah.
emotions right place and all that? Like, is that hard to do, or for you at this stage, are you kind of there going, no, I have my way of approaching this?
Well, it is, obviously it's there. You have to fight. I feel like you have to fight it becoming a job. It is a job. You're getting paid to do it, and you have a certain set of things you have to do every night and make sure you tell the story. But if it becomes a job, and I've seen actors do this, and I've seen shows where I'm going, "Oh, this is your job." that you've kind of surrendered. You know what is expected of you at the minimum, and you're going to do the minimum every night, and then go home and do the rest of your life. In order to keep it from becoming a job, I challenge myself sometimes. I never get it right. That's the top of the list. I never nail the show. There's never a night where I go, if I could have filmed that, I would never have to play this role again. Um, it's the same thing with narrating. If I ever listen to back to anything I do, when I get pickups and I go back into the studio to do pickups on something, a Star Trek book, and they play me back a sample of what I said in the sentence before, I'm like, oh no, no, it should be like this. So number one, I know I never get it right. I never nail it. So every night is a new chance to tell the story better. And it is very hard, of course, to keep something fresh. It's really hard when you know, if I tell the story just like this, if I say this line in this particular way, I will get a big laugh. And if I say this line just slightly derivated from that, it may or may not get a response. It's very hard to choose the may or may not get a response. And you see it time and again. And I do it a lot. There are many things that I know this works. So let me see if I can find a way of changing how I do it and still communicate the same idea that made them laugh. There are definitely moments in this with this character in what I call the rehearsal scenes in the second act, where I experiment nightly with different ways of doing things that are supposed to be. It's supposed to end with a big laugh. And there are nights where it absolutely does not, because I tried to do something different. I tried to say, well, let me just try to, you know, make it fresh. Let me try to entertain the cast. Let me try to break them up, because it means that I surprised them, which means I surprised the audience. And the notion of failing nightly on stage is terrifying, but it's also really important to keeping it alive and keeping it going. And so it's important there. And again, as a young actor doing a run, I remember saying to an older actor, Jonathan Hadari, I was like, "Ah, I'm tired, really tired, a little bored of doing it. It's going to be tough to do the show today." And he said, I want you to think about this in the back of your head. He goes, tonight in the audience, there's someone who will see their first show ever, their first Broadway show or their first show. He said, do it for them. Do it for the person who's never gone to a show, and you will make or break whether they become a theater lover tonight by how well you do. You know, can you tell the story in a way that is going to capture their attention and keep them going? And that's a great one for me to think about. And he said, and also potentially every night, there's someone in the audience for whom it will be the last show they ever get to see. Do it for those two people. So when I feel like, oof, two shows, I've done two shows Saturday, it's two shows, it's Sunday night. I've done three in a row now, and now I got to do a fourth one. I will think, what about that person who's never seen Moulin Rouge before, never seen a Broadway show or a piece of theater in their life? How exciting is that? Because I can remember the first show I saw in a professional theater, and just how I was vibrating with energy, that listening to an orchestra, the instruments warming up. That sound to me will never not be thrilling. When I walk into a theater and I hear a violin going through something or a horn going through something, warming up it, just going through a little piece, I get so excited because I know it's the beginning of an evening of whatever entertainment, joy, fear, horror. Who knows what it could be, but the potential is there. That sound tells me we have the potential for an exciting evening. And so in that same sense, that person is sitting out there tonight, and I could potentially contribute to a really exciting evening for them. Or I could make them go, theater's kind of boring. And I don't want that because
No.
that audience is dying out.
Robert, question for you then. So you are on stage tonight, yes?
I am on stage tonight. Yeah. No, wait. Tonight's my day off. Tonight's my night off.
So tomorrow night. So question for you then. In like today's Monday, so tomorrow's Tuesday, you'll be on stage. Is there something already you're thinking about that you're going to approach in a different way tomorrow night? Or will you wait until tomorrow to think about that?
Oftentimes, it's as the show is ending, as I'm taking off my makeup, I'm like, you know what I should try? Because I'm thinking about the show I just did. I'll be going, oh, I should try this, or I should do that. Or I'll have watched someone else do something different that I don't interact with necessarily and go, oh, I liked the attack they took on that. And it makes me think how passionate my character should be in this moment on that thing. And of course, that's all freeform. I mean, of course, tomorrow night when I get to the theater and I'm putting my makeup on, an idea may occur to me. Tomorrow night, in literally talking to someone backstage as they make a wig change, an idea can happen. They can say something that makes you go, oh, I never thought of that. Something occurred to me in this show. I'm almost embarrassed to say a year in, that, this revelation of Satine having consumption is followed by chandelier, the number chandelier. I come in, ostensibly we're going to try to get Christian to drink and forget about Satine. We're going to try to get him off thinking about her so that she can be relieved of that burden and she can do what she needs to do. And I kept coming into that scene fresh, like it's a party. We're here. The idea given me by the director is that we're here to try to get him out of himself, get him out of his head, and then when he can't, I come up in the moment with the idea we're going to get him drunk on absinthe, and that's going to send him into a hallucination, and it sends him into the number Roxanne. But one night, it was a very emotional scene, the previous scene, and then I came on with that same hangover of emotion. It's the same day. It's only hours later. And why would my character forget that the woman he thinks of as his daughter is going to die in a week or a few days? And I was so busy trying to play, we're here to entertain Christian, that I forgot that my guy might be struggling with that. That it might be hard for me to forget Satine. And so it started to inform that scene in a different way. And I don't always play that because I fear sometimes my character could get too heavy. I don't want the audience to be worried about my character. They should be focused on Christian. That's the goal of the number, and that's the story we've all agreed as a company that we're telling. So I'll give it a flavor of that sometimes. I just know that last night, for instance, it made me think of it. Last night was one of those nights where it went deep, and I had a really hard time shaking it off during that whole scene. And I do love how it affects that character. It makes it more real when he does it. But it's interesting how just the smallest thing can change what you planned on doing or what you thought you were going to do.
So, Robert,
how do you take? Oh, I'm sorry, Chef.
No, Jody, go for it. I was simply going to say to Robert that after he does his show tomorrow night, he has to send me an email and tell me what he changed. That's what I want to know now. Sorry, Jody, go for it.
No, good. I'm curious, Robert, about, I love this philosophy of, thinking about the next performance, and especially in live performance. I think that that opportunity can sometimes be endless, probably, and things that you want to change or change up. But I'm curious, does that same philosophy transfer to when you're doing like an audiobook recording or doing any type of recorded performance, whether it's TV or film or audiobook?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's a sense of spontaneity that I always want to have when telling a story, right? You don't want someone to tell you a story by saying, okay, so, we all went down to the bar, we all had pints, and by the end of the night, of course, we all got drunk and took our pants off. That's a fun story, right? Or you could say, okay, last night we all went down to the bar. Now we thought we were just going to have one drink, right? One drink. That's all we agreed. We agreed we're going to have one drink only. Oh my gosh. 3 hours later, I look up. I've got 4 pints in front of me. Next thing I know, I turn over. John's got his pants off. That story's spontaneous. I'm remembering it as I'm telling it, and it's just 10 times more exciting, right? And so the same thing when narrating, especially for me when narrating nonfiction. Fiction to me takes care of itself. If I'm telling the story and I'm trying to tell it in a spontaneous way, it will, it's got the twists and turns, especially with Star Trek. It's going to have the adventure going on. It's going to have the philosophy. It's going to have those wonderful things that help carry me down the river. With nonfiction, sometimes it can be so dry. You're talking about the history of capitalism, for instance, which can sound like your eyes will roll over. But if when you're reading that and you're narrating it in a way that says, hey, this is something, listen to this. I used to joke that, when I'm doing nonfiction, I try to pretend like I'm talking to a beautiful woman at a party, and if I can keep her attention, I get to go home with her. That you want to do it. I always want to narrate like I'm talking to someone and not just into a mic, listening to my voice and how good it sounds. That's to me the biggest piece of advice I could give to any narrator is always talk to someone. Whether you picture one little literal person or a nebulous person that's there, it's always I'm telling this story to someone. I'm not just reading words on a page. And I can hear the difference when I listen to articles, when I listen to audiobooks. I can tell right away someone who is absolutely talking to themselves. They've got the headphones on. They really have a great voice, and oh boy, do they love it. And you can tell that, as opposed to someone that wants to tell you the story, wants to share it with you.
Because it's very easy, isn't it, to kind of like when you listen to someone do an audiobook or a narration or an ad, and you're going, that's easy. But then when it's just you and the page and a microphone in front of you, and you're going, where the hell do I put the emphasis on? What word do I do it? How do I do this? Do I sound too formal? Do I sound too informal? Right. Am I rolling words in together? Am I talking too fast? Am I talking too slow?
Yeah. That's of course, that's the technique, and that's the stuff that you have to play with. And God knows how many times I stop and say, no, wait. I'm going to take it from the top of the paragraph again. I've lost myself here, or I absolutely have the wrong tone. And it's very funny when you read something and turn the page and they say, he said angrily, and you're like, oh, wait, didn't see that coming. So now let me re-narrate that. Let me read those 2 sentences together. And so it's really just so important to and obviously it comes with experience too. You start to learn, how to modulate some of those things. You know what's coming, so that as I lead up to this, I have to start building toward the moment where they jump off that cliff. Yeah. And if I don't, then the cliff surprises myself and the listener. And it should just surprise the listener and not me. But the listener should start to sense some tension and start to fear. Where are they going? Are they gonna go off they went off the cliff? That's what I want to accomplish when I narrate,
I think you do that so very well. And I think creatives are at their best when they're natural storytellers, like you said, and you definitely do that. And you also mentioned earlier about bringing to your audiobook work the sense of phrasing. But I'm wondering too, do you also bring other musical kind of concepts to that when it comes to tempo and dynamic and rhythm.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges I had in my career, early in my career, was narrating a lot of David Foster Wallace's novels. And, David Foster Wallace would have a footnote that would go 2 pages, and then you'd have to come out of that footnote and go back to the thought that you were doing. Or he would have a parenthetical that would start at the top of a page and end at the bottom of a page. And you had to find a way of lifting the idea and saying, we're going to finish this idea in just a moment, but meantime, you should know this and this and this and this and this, and I'm going to talk for another 15 minutes maybe about this and this and this, and then go, and now remember the thing we were talking about. And if I had never done Shakespeare, I don't think I could have accomplished that. But Shakespeare, it's just his ability to take a long thought and wend it through multiple lines. But if you do it right, you get lost completely if you lose that thread. But if you do it right, it's amazing. And an audience doesn't necessarily go, bravo, but they go, oh, that is an incredibly complicated thought, and I'm following it, and I'm following what's going on. It makes the character deeper. It makes everything richer, right? And so, I've listened to people early on in my career where I was like, oh, you're taking a breath so often that you're breaking up thoughts. And there are times where I literally stop and say, wait, let me take a deeper breath and do this sentence again, because it can't be broken there, or you'll lose the train of what we're saying. And so it's really important to me, that phrasing. And I only learned it from doing Shakespeare. And I thank God for having done what I did, so that when it came to those things, and you would never think, oh, well, Shakespeare really helped you narrate a Star Trek book by Greg Cox. But when Greg Cox puts together a complicated idea, it's the same thing. And you want to do Greg Cox justice, so that the idea he had in his head that he put down on the page, that is much easier to see on the page because you see the parentheses, you see the commas, you're able to stop and put it together again. When you're just hearing someone say it, I have to say it. I have to phrase it the way Greg thought it. Otherwise, you'll lose the sense of it.
So are you saying that Star Trek Treknobabble that's in Treklit is equivalent to a Shakespearean narrator? Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely, yes. Well, because, again, we talk about that. That sense of commitment. If you don't commit to the Treknobabble 100%, then it's Treknobabble. If you commit to it 100%, then it's the explanation for why the engine's not running right now. And because of that explanation, we understand why they didn't just warp away. I mean, obviously, one of the biggest plot things we have to do in Star Trek over and over and over is to suddenly the engines fail, the deflectors failing, the photon torpedoes aren't loading, because the Enterprise is such a mighty ship. Or Enterprise is such a mighty ship, and that's one I struggle with too.
We all do.
We bring that up with every author, Robert.
Yeah,
every time we talk about it, we all say it's the Enterprise or Enterprise. Which one is it?
Exactly. And so, Enterprise is such a mighty ship that if you didn't cripple it, then there'd be no plot, right? And so you have to do that over and over. So therefore, all the technical stuff, the reasons for those things are so important. Otherwise, people are like, ugh, another plot gimmick, But if you can say it in a convincing way, they're like, oh man, I can't believe that Ion Storm did that to that. That's what you're.
Well, it's really what makes some of the best episodes, right? For what we see on our screens, but then that translates, to what we read in the books or hear in the audiobooks. That it's about the pacing of those moments, and it's about the some of our favorite actors. I think a lot of Marina Sirtis at times, that where she would be in one of those intense moments, and just the character you wouldn't expect to thrive in those moments, and does, and it's the most convincing. And
Yeah.
so I think that speaks a lot towards how Trek can continue with those
Oh,
intense
yeah.
technobabble moments and still make it believable.
Yeah. As long as we stay, I think like any set of stories, if the mythology is
Mm.
cohesive, then we all agree. But if we've all agreed that the mythology is this thing can't happen and they suddenly do it, or this thing can happen, and you'd never want, I think, a listener or a reader to go, well, then why don't you just use that? You
Mm.
know, one of the trickiest ones I think they've ever done is that you can, in the transporter core, you can dematerialize someone and then save them
Yep.
and then rematerialize them when you have the cure or the whatever. It's so tricky, right? Because everyone's like, why don't we do that with everybody? You know, and so you have to come up with a good reason why, like it's decaying or it's, you know, it's whatever. You have to come up with, when you create your mythology, you have to stay with that mythology. Or especially hardcore fans will go, now hang on a second. No, no, no. And I hate when I'm watching a movie and I go, oh, come on. You know, it makes me crazy.
So, Robert, I'm guessing you're probably in the process of doing Identity Theft by Greg Cox at the moment for the
Uh,
audio.
just finished it. Yeah.
Nice.
So, what
Yeah.
I'm curious about, me and Jody were talking about this earlier on, and we're very curious about what is the entire process, start to finish, in terms of, say, how far in advance do you get the book? Do you read the book yourself fully to start
Yeah.
getting a feel of, okay, this character is this character is that, these are some of the words I'm going to need, and all that kind of thing. And then how long does it take in the recording booth? Like, how long do you do a session for, and how often do you have to come back and things like that?
Yeah. Well, you know, I'll get the offer, and every one that I've done has been with Karen Perlman as director slash producer, and Karen goes whack. Karen goes back to these when she was recording Nimoy and Shatner, and all those guys in those days, and so I mean, she's an invaluable Star Trek resource. But so I'll get the offer. We'll discuss when we will be able to record it. And then, of course, she gets me the book right away. I have to read the book. I will color code each line to each character, just so that as I'm going down the page, I'm not confused as to who's talking.
Mhm.
And then naturally we generate a list of pronunciations because God love them. There's always a thousand, you know, names, and oftentimes what can be so frustrating to me is I can uh, in identity theft. I think it's the Cathara station.
Mm.
I might be saying that wrong, but I will read an entire book going the Cathara station in my head. And then we get in the booth and it's the Cathara station. I'm like, oh, okay. So the Cathara station, and that's hard for me. But Karen is wonderful about she'll go out and find all the pronunciations. She'll then hit up Greg or David with the list. Hey, here are the ones we can't find from previous episodes, series. Help us out. And the authors will then themselves, you know, say, here's how I want these names pronounced. And there are a few that are delightful that we found over the years. One is that Sarek or Sarek
Mm.
in the original series is pronounced in two different ways,
Yep.
you know, depending on who's saying it. There are many things from the original series where no one cared, and they just whoever was saying the line said the name the way they wanted to say it, and so we've gone with Nimoy when he said Sarek in one thing, Sarek, and so we say Sarek.
Elongating the A kind of thing in it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
instead of Ser. And my favorite one with Karen is that there is uh, very possibly an apocryphal story of William Shatner being brought in to do some looping for an episode. And he had said the word sabotage. And they were like, oh, yeah, Bill, and this one is sabotage. And you said sabotage. And he's like, yeah, that's how you say it. And there an argument ensued, and that's how he says it. And so I scan each original series book, hoping against hope for the few, and it has come up over and over,
The
where
sabotage.
Kirk will say sabotage, and so I will say sabotage. It just delights me to no end, and I just love it. It's like, you know, it even if it never happened, it makes sense that it could happen to me,
Mhm.
because I know, I always say there is nothing less reliable than an overconfident narrator. I know how to pronounce that word. I've always pronounced that word that way. And then you look it up in the dictionary and you're like, nope, that's not the word at all. And so it is so humbling when you first start doing this to go, oh my God, I have so many words in my head that I have mispronounced my entire life. And then there are words that I think because of the Shakespeare training, I will default to sort of a more British pronunciation, and I have to be reminded that's we're recording these in America. It's American, and I had a wonderful producer work with me years ago, Laura Wilson, who said, yes, both pronunciations are correct, but why don't we default to the one that will be less likely to pull the listener out of the story?
Hmm.
And I went, wow, that's such a great way of thinking about it. So when I have one where I go, no, it's pronounced this way, I think, well, wait, how do most people pronounce it? And if that is the way, and the dictionary has both, let's go with the way that most people pronounce it so that no one goes, sabotage? What? That they don't stop and come out of the story and go, that's not how that's said. So I have that. We go through, we get all the pronunciations. I've highlighted all the characters. On certain books, if I'm not that familiar with a character, I use an app called I Annotate on the iPad, and I will take audio clips from the characters from, say, Discovery or from Voyager or whatever, that I may not necessarily have the rhythm right for them. And I'll put a clip right there at the first time they talk, so that before I start reading them, I'll hit that, listen to it, and get it. I I'm not a mimic. I'm not great at absolutely making you believe you're listening to Leonard Nimoy or William Shatner, but I like to think that I get the rhythm and a feel for the character, so that you're like, that's Spock, that's Chekhov, without necessarily having to hear the attribution. You want to be able to be listening to the story and have someone say something like, I need you to check into the database and find out where that is, and do it for me now. And someone else saying, Captain, I've looked into that, and I will try to find that for you, said Spock. You want to know it's Spock before you heard said Spock. And so I try to give a flair for that. Of course, Scotty comes up and I'm dancing for joy. Chekhov, who's in this book, all throughout this book, I'm like, yes, I get to do Chekhov. It's fantastic, and it's so much fun to get to do those guys. And so, I'll have that in the script for me, and then we get into the studio and we just start reading, and
Do you use a
it's
physical book, Robert, or is it a kind of a
I
tablet
use
thing?
I use the iPad.
Okay.
And when I began, they would give us the manuscript, each single page, and you would get to the bottom of a page and have to pause, turn the page, and then start recording again. And if a sentence continued, you had to make sure you had two pages side by side, And and when the iPad came along, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. First of all, I'm not carrying this giant thing in my bag. I'm just carrying this little pad, and I can have audio clips and I can have all that. So yeah, I definitely use the iPad. I use the iPad Pro. It's big. And of course,
Mhm.
as I get older, I still don't wear glasses, but I get to cheat and I get to expand the size. And nothing's more humiliating than like having your phone and looking at a text and having some 20-year-old in the cast walk by and go, oh my God, your texts are so big. Like, stop it. What are you talking about? They're normal size. I don't know what you mean. But
So, so Robert, normally, like the length of the current audiobooks are like 10 hours, even more, and things
yeah,
like that then as well. So how long would you go into the recording booth for?
for like a 10-hour book, it's roughly 3 days. like from 10 to about 4:30 or 5. We can knock out about 100 pages on a very determined day. We can get about 120 pages a day. In But Karen and I also love to talk. And so while we're in there recording the book, something will happen and we'll just talk about it. We'll talk about, because she knows Star Trek inside and out as well. And so we'll discuss, what's been going on too, which is part of the fun. It's like, if I'm just reading all day, that's one thing, but it's great to have something exciting happen and then talk about it and share it. So yeah, it's about 3 days of that. And then you'll do pickups. Obviously I make mistakes. Even if I'm reading it and Karen is there and an engineer is there listening to it, still things get by you. And I think it's because sometimes you're just so convincing, as you're reading it, it just sounded right, but you missed that it was a then instead of a then, whatever. And so you'll have pickups, though Karen is really good. I think she prides herself from the old days of really getting to engineer it and fix words. She'll find the word somewhere else and try to fit it in. Does it work? Okay, it sounds right. I'll do that. So I have less pickups with her than I do with most people. But still, you might have pickups and you try to do it, and it's hard because there are times where you have a cold when the pickups come, or you are getting over a cold when you're doing the actual recording, and so what your voice was, and then you get the pickups and you're like, wait, I have to read these 14 words. I have to fit them into the sentence, and I don't quite sound like I did. And so they have to fuss with it and try to make that happen.
I actually noticed that quite a lot. Listening to Patrick Stewart's autobiography, I noticed a lot of change in his voice and things like that. And I've noticed it in some of the later Shatner books as well, where it's kind of where you can hear the change in the voice, obviously between different days of recordings and things like that.
And for guys like that, they'll go in on Tuesday and record for a couple of hours, and then they'll go off and do something, and maybe next week they'll, because they're not going to rush them to get the book in time. They'll work around their schedules. They're going to film, so then between filming they'll do this. So a couple of weeks might go by. So yeah, naturally, your voice might change a little bit and do that.
So did Identity Theft take you 3 days?
I think it was 3 days. It might have been 3 and change. Like we might come in like for a couple hours on the 4th day. But yeah, it's about that time. And
can you talk about a little bit about, because in Identity Theft there are a lot of characters and a lot of different characters, a lot of different personalities, and I've seen it too. I think one that stands out for me personally is Una McCormick's The Last Best Hope, where you've got Picard in a new era and Raffi in a different era, and she's a new voice to the kind of the world of Trek there. But I'm curious how you quickly bounce between those characters when recording. I know that there could be pauses, so like you talked about earlier, getting the rhythm of maybe a character that we aren't as familiar with. But I think a lot about that dialogue between Picard and Raffi in that novel, and I know, having read Identity Theft, that the characters just are nonstop in a single scene. So I'm curious how you deal with that.
It really helps to obviously read the book ahead of time to know what's happening. And from my color coding really helps me a lot. I'll know that particular color. And of course, I'm old school. So Shatner, Kirk is gold. Spock is blue. McCoy is a lighter blue. Uhura and Scotty, when they're in the same scene, I'm like, because they're both red. And so I just do that to myself. But it really does help me to know, who's doing who. And, it's fun. The actor in me loves to be able to, to go from Picard and talking like this to Raffi talking to him, and doing that. It's fun to change back and forth. I mean, listen, there's a part of me, it's that line from Midsummer Night's Dream of Bottom when he's saying, "Oh, let me play the lion too. I shall roar." Every actor wants to play all the roles, right? Audiobooks give me that in spades. And so, but it's fun. It's fun being a little psycho and jumping back and forth. But I do try to do it without stopping. And that color coding really helps me. And I know other narrators never touch the script like that. They read the book, they get a sense of what they want to do, and their brain works in a wonderful way that they just can do the jump without fear. For me, that really just helps me to know.
Does the performer and you rehearse for
You
these?
know what I'll rehearse is a voice.
Yeah.
If it's a new voice, I'll go over it a couple times and go, do I have the, and I'll play it back to myself and go, okay, that doesn't sound anything like them. Or A, you're not going to be able to sound like them. So what's the rhythm of that, the way they speak? And if can you get the rhythm of the way they speak? And if you can, I think half the job is done then with that. But so many of them, fortunately, I know really well. And so I get them. I'm very proud. Somewhere along the line, I got Sulu's voice down. I was able to place it in the back of my throat, more to the back of my mouth, the roof of the mouth, and I was able to go there and slightly through my nose, and and I was like, "That's Sulu! I got Sulu!" And so it's really fun. Uhura has always eluded me, and I feel like I'm letting people down when I have an Uhura scene because I just sort of try to lighten my voice generically, but I can't quite get her rhythm, and I hate that I don't have that.
Just
Yeah, she varies her rhythm, I think, when she speaks. Like there's uh
But
not
she's
a
very
consistent
distinct,
tempo. Yes,
but she's a
very.
distinctive voice, and so it's I don't know why I just can't find that.
and Robert said, like being a Star Trek fan as you were, like how did the very first, Star Trek audiobook come up, like, and how excited were you to
Oh,
do it?
crazy. You know, when my agent said, "Do you have an offer from Simon and Schuster to do a Star Trek book? Are you interested?" What? I was I remember joking with her. I said, um, "Do you remind me, do I have to pay them?" And she's like, "No, no, they're actually going to pay you, and I'm going to take my commission, and we're going to do that." But no, that was thrilling, and I wish I could remember which one it was, but it was an original series book, and I just remember just being in heaven. Just it's just so much fun. Also, just to get to go revisit these people. To this is what I love about the books is that we have a finite amount of episodes of series, and yet we can have an infinite amount of these books, and so we who grew up with it, the people who came late to it, the people who are just discovering it now, you reach the end of the television episodes or the films, and there's of course you want more. You always want more from a family you've joined or from a mythology that I want to hear more stories. And so it's fantastic. And so for me, it's always fun to see, okay, what are they going to come up with this time? Um, whether it's, brand new, Strange New Worlds or an original series. It's really exciting. I loved getting to narrate Star Trek the Motion Picture
Mm.
audiobook because it filled in some gaps for me. I think anyone who's a fan of that film read the book as well, because obviously the book was written to accompany the film, based on the screenplay. But it just deepens the experience. And then when you watch the movie again, you're like, oh yeah, I know why that's happening. I know what's going on here. I really enjoyed that, and I really love getting to go more in depth into characters that I've watched for so long, and get to see them have new adventures, get to see them uh, age, and get to see them deal with their mortality, and they did that in the films, a lot. Obviously, Wrath of Khan, Kirk is dealing with his mortality literally and metaphorically, but to see all of the other characters that don't necessarily get as much screen time get to deal. And in this, in Identity Theft, watching Chekhov, he is now in his 40s, and he's Commander Chekhov, and he's had a life, and it starts with him young, so we get to see that the Chekhov we know, and we throughout the book we see him as not as Chekhov necessarily, because there's a bit of morphing of bodies. But it's wonderful to get to see his relationship with Sulu in this, which we only see ever snippets in the original series, right? But there's a real friendship there that you learn more through the novels, I think, than through the TV series, and it's delightful. Of course they would be, you know, and one would be a little more experienced. Sulu's got a little more under his belt, and Chekhov doesn't when they first meet. And it's wonderful how they influence each other. And Greg does a really great job of mining that relationship for all the possible traps and mines for the person imitating Chekhov or living in Chekhov's body. Because if Chekhov didn't have those relationships, it'd be the easiest thing in the world to imitate Chekhov.
Can I
But
just check,
because he
Robert?
has,
Who published the motion picture one? Because I was like, listening to you said it, I was there going, I haven't seen that on Audible before. So
I think it was a Simon and Schuster.
was it? Jeepers, I have to check that out because I didn't realize there was an audiobook version of it at all available.
Yeah, I think it's Alan Dean Foster, but I don't
Yeah,
want to commit
it
to
was.
that
Yeah,
yet.
we,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
we
yeah.
we actually had him on the show as well ages
Yeah,
back as well.
a
Like so, yeah, that was his version as well.
legend.
How did you get into Star Trek originally, Robert? Was it just kind of like, did your
You know,
family enjoy it, or was
in
it
the
just college time?
70s, reruns of
Yeah.
Star Trek in the 70s, I was living in Texas, and they would come on, I want to say at like 4 or 5 o'clock, and I was hooked. I mean, I loved science fiction in general. And what's amazing is that, of course, you see the spaceship as a kid, and you're like, oh, phasers and communicators. But what Star Trek does so well, of course, is that it lures you in with those, and then it hits you with human stories and stories that really, especially as a young man, make you think about the world around you, make you think about, the issues. Certainly in the '60s, the issues of the day. Why do I say that? Like racism has gone away. The issues that were really present. You is it Let That Be Your Last Battlefield?
Mm-hmm.
Is it
Yeah,
the episode of the
yeah.
yeah. You see that, and you have that moment where Kirk's like, you look the same. And the guy's like, are you kidding me? The left side's black, the right side's white. And it really reduces this silliness of skin color um, instantly. And so as a kid, you're watching this thing thinking, oh, cool, starships and lasers. And then you're coming out of the end of the episode like thinking about the world. Great, great thing. Which is why I have to laugh when they talk about Star Trek being woke or you're like, this is the original, this is the series that woke may have came from. I mean, the notion that you're decrying any episode of Star Trek as trying to be socially conscious, the whole series was created about that. So when Discovery is at the fore of when Discovery was fresh and new and doing it, and people are like, blah, blah. Like, are you kidding me? This is pure Star Trek. This is Star Trek on crack. I mean, it's great.
So, Robert, I have two questions for you. They mightn't be the same answer. They might be the same answer. One, what is your favorite episode of Star Trek? And two, if you were to introduce someone not into Star Trek, what episode would you suggest?
Wow. Wow. Oh, there are so many. I'm trying to think of like what's the first thing that hits me, but there are so many. Um, what is a quintessential?
We have him, Jody. We got him. We got him
Oh
with a
my
question.
God, it caught me
We have
on
him.
this.
We have him. We have
I
him.
mean,
We have him.
a bunch of different ones come to mind, and then I think of like one that struck me as a young man only because the actress was so beautiful, and that's not the real reason. That's not why I would do it. But I remember going, I'm in love with this woman. Uh, and I don't remember the title of the series, but the title of the episode, but where they were in the cloud world and the miners were
The
below.
Cloud Miners.
Yes,
Yeah, that's what it
and
is. Yeah.
and that young woman that had it for Spock, I was like, I want to marry her. The 13-year-old me, whatever. But Gosh.
See, it's a hard question because what you do is you almost say to yourself, what do I like? But then the question is, it's not what
Yeah,
I like, it's the other person, because some people might be up for just a bit of action adventure. Some people might be up for more
that's
depth
it.
and things like that. Like I remember my fiance, she's not into Star Trek at all. And I showed her two episodes. I showed her The Visitor from Deep Space Nine, and I showed her City on the Edge of Forever from the original series. And the funny thing was, halfway during the episode, she was there going, I don't like that guy. I said, who don't you like? She said, I don't like that Kirk fella. She said, but I like that Spock fella. Spock now. She says, that's right up my street.
Yeah. I have to tell you, the one that keeps coming back to me is I would show them The Wrath of Khan because I think it captured the perfect two sides. It's got the action that would get someone into the action stories, but it also has the deep introspection. Now, it's difficult to introduce someone new to that because they don't have the history we have with
Yep.
them. Um, and and so the ending with Kirk and Spock won't be as meaningful to them as it would be to the rest of us. But I feel like I want to show that to people, who are like, I don't like Star Trek. I always want to go, you got to watch The Wrath of Khan, and I think you'll do it. Which also in the J.J. Abrams the Kelvin universe, when it was reversed, I remember thinking this is unearned,
Yeah.
only because they haven't had a life relationship. There's an attachment, there's a connection they've had, and a respect and a friendship they've formed. But the tragedy of losing someone like that happens in The Wrath of Khan, as opposed to in the Kelvin universe, is just so much more magnified because of the relationship, not only that they have had, but that we have had with them all these years. We bring so much to that. But God, I wish I could tell you what my favorite episode of Star Trek is.
Jody, you know what's going to happen tomorrow night? Like Robert's going to
He'll
be on
remember.
stage, and in the middle
Yep.
of his performance, he'll go, I know the fucking answer
It's
now.
going to hit me. It always happens, right? You're like, I can't answer this now. But then later you're like, oh, wait, why didn't I say this? This is, of course,
Yes.
the one that I love the most. I remember
What we'll
as
do
a
is
kid.
we'll do a really janky edit of kind of editing in Robert when he gives me the answer in about 2 weeks' time. We re-record for 2 minutes. Just-
Right. And I'll have a different voice and a different shirt.
Yes. Yes.
I'll be like,
Just
let me
like
think
that.
about that. And then in a completely different shirt, like, the city on the edge of forever.
Maybe you can record it in full Moulin Rouge.
God, there
Yeah,
it is.
That would be
Yes.
fantastic.
With the whole
Fantastic.
makeup, everything.
Yes.
Actually, do you know what
Is
we'll do
your favorite? Go ahead, Joe.
No, that's what we'll do. What we'll do is we'll do a segue right here. So I'm going to say it again. Robert, what is your favorite episode of Star Trek? Pause. Mike, when you're doing the edit, right, this is the part Robert is going to re-record in full costume. And you just put it in
That's
here,
right.
and then we're going to pick up the episode again
I'll-
in 2, in 1, and we'll keep on going.
We'll do a transporter effect, and I'll be
Oh
there.
yes, yes.
And
Epic.
I have a video of maybe 4 years ago, Halloween, where I made the Kirk the green uniform
Yeah.
that he wore. I did the work, and then I was like, I'm not good at this, so I sent it to Toronto. My sister, who sewed it. I had the pattern. She sewed it. She sent it back to me, and so that's what I should put that uniform on.
Oh,
I
God,
was
there
so
it
proud
is.
of that because it really I slimmed down to Kirk size, and I was very pleased.
Is Kirk your favorite character?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's my guy. He's my captain. I mean, I love. There's many other captains, obviously, who are fantastic and do a great thing, but that was my first captain. That's the guy. The man of action who's also a man of letters, and I think the books helped flesh that out too as time went on. That Kirk was an exceptional person. He's not just a punch the villain and kiss the girl thing, and that reputation is kind of crazy. You on the episodes where he is seducing women, or they're seducing him, or he's with them. You're like, oh, it's very 60s. The dialogue here, the way they're connecting with each other feels weird because it's just not our time. But he didn't do it that often.
And if
He
you look at the
spent
episode,
all
like
that stuff.
if you look at Court Martial, you really see like he knows the rule book backwards.
Yeah. Yes. And so that's my guy, and he's the man who beat the Kobayashi Maru, right? It, that there's something wonderful about that, and there was something wonderful I always thought about not explaining how.
Yeah.
That in that and listen, I love in the Kelvin universe. I think Chris Pine was fantastic, and I love in the Kelvin universe that they made that a very funny thing, that we're showing you the moment when he beats the Kobayashi. But I loved in the original series, you just heard about that. He won the unwinnable situation. Um, and and I loved that. That this is what he's saying is not that there's ever going to not be a situation you can't win, which of course in Khan really comes back in spades, but that you have to always believe you can beat the unwinnable situation. It's that hope that is what makes Kirk, I think, such a great captain, because he never stops believing in his crew. He never stops believing in himself.
Robert, we have a few last questions for you. The first question is our Adam Driver question, which we always ask, which is, do you find it hard watching or listening back to your own performances?
Yeah. I the only time I ever hear myself perform is when I have pickups and they play me the sentence that I messed up, and they do it again. And oftentimes I'm like, oh my God. Because you don't ever sound as resonant on as you hear in your own head, right? In my head, I have this lush, deep, beautiful voice, and then it comes out on the recording. I'm like, who's that tenor? Who's that guy? And so that's always hard. No, I never like watching that stuff. But
So
also, in film stuff, the few film and TV things I've done, you have an image of what you are when you're doing it, and the minute you see it, it breaks it. There was an acting class I had in Illinois State called Animals, and it was an entire semester. You would spend the first third of the semester researching an animal. I picked a gorilla. The second third of the semester was being that animal among the other animals of the class, interacting and trying to incorporate and be that. And the third part of the semester was morphing that animal into a character, a human character. And it was all improv and all that. And it was all about character study and all these things. When I was the gorilla walking around, and there's no mirrors or anything like that, I was a gorilla, and all these things. And I believed I was that thing. And we were doing a sample for high school students coming in, and happened to be in a room with a mirror. And I started walking around as my gorilla and saw myself, and it was the most deflating thing in the world. Because here I'm this skinny guy I'd only ever seen myself as this giant gorilla thing, and I look and see this skinny little college kid, and it was awful. And I feel that way so often watching a television show or listening to a book. I'm like, oh, that's not who I thought I was. So I'd rather keep the illusion of what I thought I was projecting out to the world than the reality of that guy.
That's humbling, I think, is probably the best word for that, when you see or hear or listen to what you have produced and put out there into the world.
Oh yeah.
Before the show asks his last two questions, I do want to thank you for being such an integral part of Star Trek's extended world building, and that I hope that fans flock to your audiobooks. Like when we know an audiobook is coming out, we specifically look for your name attached to it. So
that's really great to hear.
It is, and it's the Trek literature, as you said, is such a huge part of this Star Trek universe, and you have become a consummate part of that. So thank you for your efforts.
Robert, two questions for you. Number one, what's next for Robert Petkoff? And also, would you love to be in Star Trek at some point?
Well, the answer to the number two is
No, I
without
absolutely
a
wouldn't. That's for
doubt.
fucking
Not at
nerds. Like only
all.
nerds
I
watch that fucking stuff.
I have had one audition to play an alien on I think it was Discovery, um, and my entire life and all my life I've been like, I want to be on Star Trek. Let me be in Star Trek. And listen, put me in prosthetics. I'll do everything. I would kill to be in an episode of Star Trek. You know, that is I think that at that point I'd be like, I can retire. I never need to do anything again. Um and I can't even remember what the first question was. Oh, what's next? What's next? Hopefully what's next is an episode of Star Trek. I'm still doing Moulin Rouge on Broadway, which of course, again, why I have all this silly facial hair. And I will finish on Broadway January 25th, and then I'm going right back to the tour. The tour will end in August in Boston, and so I'll spend the next 6 months working on Moulin Rouge still. And at the end of it all, it'll have been 3 years of a journey of doing this character on the road and on Broadway, and it's been really satisfying. After
Will,
that, God only knows.
will you
You know,
be in or around Indiana at any point, Robert Manager?
Right.
we went through Indianapolis
Hmm.
with Moulin Rouge last January,
Yes.
and it was great. It was a great
I
audience. I'm really happy.
my wife got to see that show when you were in Indy. So
Oh, fabulous.
well done.
It's just a fun show, and it's really good to do. But I've been really blessed that my career has been very varied. That somewhere along the line I got to the point where I thought I'll work. That anxiety of what's the next job um, kind of abated somewhat to the point where I was like, I have Kirk's confidence and hope that I'll work. You know that something else is going to come along. Um, Audiobooks were probably the greatest thing that happened to my career in terms of giving me that security because I can do those anywhere, anytime now. I've been doing them on the road. Uh, Karen and I have done some books together. I think even a Star Trek that we say we recorded at Under the Blanket Studios, which is literally me in a closet under a blanket um, to record it. We created this little place, but it has afforded me the ability to relax in my ambitions of what's next, and to be able to say no, which is sometimes the only power actors have is to say no to a project or no to a role, um, and it's nice to go. I know that role won't make me it won't challenge me, it won't make me excited, it won't make me happy, and as a result you won't want to be around me. You know, it won't be fun to do the show with me. After a month I'll be bored, and I won't be the company member you want me to be, so therefore no thank you. I'll pass the audition, or I'll pass the offer, and I can do that because I know that I can make some money doing audiobooks and survive off that. And so it's been a really great thing, and all of it happened because I was doing commercial voiceovers, and my agent at the time, Linda Weaver, said, "Hey, would you want to narrate audiobooks? Hachette Publishing is looking for new narrators, and they have some auditions coming up." And so many of the guys doing commercial VOs are like, wait, go stand in a studio for 3 or 4 days and record from 10 to 5, or go to a studio for an hour and a half and potentially make $30,000 off of a commercial. And they were like, no, thank you. I don't want to do that. And I was like, I love reading. I think that would be fun. And so I did. And the very first book I did for Hachette got nominated for the Audie Awards, and I got nominated for Best Male Narrator of the Year, and I was like, well, this is fun. And I thought that would be like that so now I just get awards all the time, and and listen, I've gotten my share, and I'm very pleased with that. But it's not about that, and you realize very quickly that that time you spend in front of the mic when you're reading the book, you better be enjoying that book, because you're going to spend a lot of time reading it, and a lot of people are going to spend a lot of time listening to it. So if you're not enjoying it, or you're not reading it in a way that it's enjoyable to listen to, then you're not doing the job right. And boy, you're going to be one unhappy son of a bitch, and you're going to make a lot of other people unhappy. So in every single book I've narrated, I've always found what's cool about this, what's interesting about this. And I'm really lucky because there are books I would have never read on my own, I would never chosen for myself, that were chosen for me to narrate, that at the end of it I thought, thank God, I never would have thought of that genre, I never would have picked up that author. And now I have this new story in my head, and I have this new way of feeling about the world that this person imparted to me, and it really is great.
Robert, our very last question then for you. It's a very simple question. I'm pretty sure you'll be able to answer it extremely handily. What does Star Trek mean to you?
Star Trek means to me hope. It means a belief in a future that's better than the one we have now. I'm getting emotional thinking about it. Star Trek came into my life and affected me in a way that I never expected as a young man, because I never thought I would think about social issues like that. But at the very core of Star Trek is a society that says, hey, we figured out how to talk to each other. We figured out how to get beyond our differences, to recognize that we will always have differences, but learn a way of dealing with those differences in a way that are not destructive. And so Star Trek will always mean to me a belief in the future, and a belief in a better future. God, I'm such an actor. But it is such a meaningful thing to me in my life, and I wish to God that everybody could have that same feeling, that belief that we can make it through to a future where our differences do not divide us. They simply make us unique. And that's what Star Trek taught me.
Poignant words, and ones that resonate with so many.
Yeah.
So it's appreciated, your perspective on that. Thank you.
I'm a big baby.
So, Robert, thank you so much for being our guest on this week's episode of the Clonestar podcast. Jodi, thank you as well for being my co-host as well. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for listening to us as well. We look forward to welcoming you back to another episode of the Clonestar podcast. Until then, Robert, again, thank you so much. And until next time, guys, live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper.